Judge Sarah Henderson's morning began like any other Tuesday in September. The gentle hum of her office's climate control system provided a soothing background rhythm as she sorted through the day's cases. Steam rose lazily from her favorite ceramic mug, a chipped reminder of her first day on the bench, the chamomile tea within offering its familiar comfort. Through her second-floor chamber windows, Sarah watched the courthouse plaza come to life. Early morning joggers had given way to purposeful strides of attorneys and court officials, their briefcases swinging in synchronized motion. The old maple tree outside, showing the first hints of autumn gold, cast dancing shadows across her polished oak desk. "Your first case is at 9:30, Your Honor," her judicial assistant, Marcus, announced as he placed a fresh stack of files on her desk. His efficiency, as always, was impeccable. Sarah smiled, appreciating how he color-coded the urgent matters with small sticky tabs. "Thank you, Marcus. How many on the docket today?" 12 cases, mostly routine. Traffic infractions, minor disputes. He paused, shuffling through his notebook. "Though there's something about the Washington case that might interest you." Sarah reached for the corresponding file, her fingers brushing against the smooth manila folder. As she opened it, something flickered in her mind, a distant echo of laughter, the smell of old library books, a half-forgotten melody from decades ago. She dismissed it as another bout of déjà vu, a common occurrence when you'd seen thousands of cases over 15 years. The morning sun caught the silver threads in her hair as she leaned forward, adjusting her reading glasses. Washington, Lisa M. The name sat there on the paper, seemingly ordinary yet somehow making her heart beat a little faster. Sarah ran her fingers over the embossed letterhead, trying to chase down the elusive feeling of recognition. Her chamber's wall clock ticked steadily, marking time as she studied the file with unusual intensity. Standard documentation, routine procedures, yet something made her linger on each detail. The defendant's date of birth nagged at her consciousness. It was the same year as hers, down to the month. Sarah stood, walking to her window. Below, the courthouse steps were filling with the day's participants in the justice system. A group of pigeons scattered as a young lawyer hustled past, his tie fluttering in the September breeze. She touched the cool glass, her reflection overlaying the scene below. "Marcus," she called out, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that made her assistant look up from his desk in the outer office. "Did you notice anything unusual about the Washington file?" He appeared in her doorway, brow furrowed in thought. "Nothing that jumped out, Your Honor. Standard traffic case. Though," he paused, consulting his notes, "the defendant's credentials are quite impressive. CEO of her own consulting firm, multiple community service awards." Sarah nodded absently, her mind still trying to grasp the ethereal thread of memory that seemed to dance just beyond her reach. She straightened her black robe, checking her appearance in the small mirror by the door. The woman who looked back at her was confident, accomplished, exactly who she'd always wanted to become. "Time to begin," she murmured to herself, gathering her files. As she prepared to enter her courtroom, that strange feeling persisted, a sensation that today wouldn't be just another Tuesday, that something extraordinary waited in the routine pages of her docket. Little did she know, the next few hours would unravel a tapestry of memories she'd carefully tucked away, bringing her face to face with a past she never expected to encounter from the bench. The courtroom settled into its familiar rhythm as the morning session began. Judge Henderson maintained her usual composure, handling each case with practiced efficiency. Yet there was an undercurrent of anticipation she couldn't quite shake, growing stronger as the Washington case drew nearer. "Next case, Washington, Lisa M.," the court clerk announced. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and a woman entered with measured steps. Her deep blue business suit caught the light streaming through the high windows, and her natural confidence drew every eye in the room. Lisa Washington moved with the kind of grace that suggested both professional success and personal assurance. Sarah felt an immediate shift in her perception, like looking at a photograph that suddenly comes into focus. The woman's profile stirred something in her memory, the slight tilt of her head, the way she adjusted her sleeve, gestures that seemed to echo across decades. As Lisa approached the podium, Sarah noticed how she greeted the court clerk with a warm smile that transformed her entire face. That smile. It triggered a flash of memory. Textbooks spread across a library table, whispered jokes, and stifled laughter earning them stern looks from the librarian. "Good morning, Your Honor." Lisa's voice filled the courtroom, rich and clear. The timbre of it sent another jolt through Sarah's consciousness. She had heard this voice before, hadn't she? Not here in her courtroom, but somewhere far back in time, when dreams were still taking shape and the future stretched endless before them. Sarah gripped her gavel slightly tighter, maintaining her professional demeanor even as her mind raced. There was something about the way Lisa stood, head high, shoulders back, the same posture their debate team coach had drilled into them. Their debate team. The thought came unbidden, yet Sarah couldn't quite grasp its significance. "Ms. Washington," Sarah began, her judicial tone steady despite her internal turbulence, "please state your credentials for the record." It was a standard request, one she'd made thousands of times, but today it felt different. As Lisa began speaking about her business consultancy and community work, Sarah found herself studying the woman's hands. They moved with elegant precision as she spoke, occasionally emphasizing a point. One finger bore a simple silver ring with a distinctive pattern, similar to the friendship rings from that little shop in the mall where they used to. Sarah's thoughts stuttered to a halt. The weight of recognition pressed against her chest, not quite breaking through but growing harder to ignore. She watched as Lisa presented her documentation, each movement familiar yet strange, like a song played in a different key. The morning light shifted, casting subtle shadows across Lisa's face, and for a moment, Sarah saw a superimposition of past and present. The successful businesswoman before her overlaid with images of a teenage girl with bright eyes and ambitious dreams. The girl who had once, who had been. The proceedings continued with professional precision, but the air in the courtroom seemed to grow thicker with unspoken recognition. Other attendees might have noticed the judge taking slightly longer pauses between questions, or perhaps the way her gaze lingered on the defendant's face a fraction longer than usual. As Lisa finished her initial statement, she looked directly at the bench, and their eyes met fully for the first time. In that moment, the carefully maintained distance between judge and defendant wavered, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, distorting everything they thought they knew about this ordinary Tuesday morning. "Please explain the circumstances of your case, Ms. Washington," Judge Henderson requested, her voice steady despite the growing whirlpool of memories threatening to surface. The familiarity of the judicial script anchored her, even as her mind raced with half-formed recollections. Lisa began her explanation, her voice carrying that distinctive cadence that had always commanded attention. "Your Honor, on the evening in question, I was returning from a youth mentorship program I run at the community center. We had just finished our annual leadership workshop, and I was—" She paused, letting out a small laugh at some detail of the story. That laugh, that particular musical note of amusement. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer fully in her courtroom. Her mind transported her to a rain-soaked afternoon in the high school cafeteria. Two girls huddled over cold French fries and chemistry notes, one of them, Lisa, laughing exactly like that after successfully explaining molecular bonds through a ridiculous dance metaphor. "The electrons waltz, Sarah. They don't cha-cha." Back in the present, Lisa continued her testimony, unaware of the judge's internal time travel. "I admit I was distracted, Your Honor. One of our students had just received a full scholarship to Princeton, and I was mentally planning a celebration." Princeton. Another memory crashed through. Tears of joy in the school parking lot, two acceptance letters clutched in shaking hands. "We did it, Sarah. Both of us. East Coast, here we come." But then life had intervened, hadn't it? Sarah's father's illness had kept her closer to home, changing everything. The light had just turned yellow, Lisa was saying, her hands moving in that articulate way they always had when making a point. The same way they'd moved during countless debate preparations, mapping out arguments in the air like an orchestra conductor. Sarah gripped the edge of her bench, forcing herself to focus on the present. The courtroom seemed to pulse with the dual reality of now and then, professional distance warring with personal history. She watched Lisa reference her perfect driving record, her community service, her dedication to mentoring future leaders. A fragment of conversation echoed, "We're going to change the world, Sarah. You through law, me through business. They won't know what hit them." They'd made that pact during senior year, sharing a pint of mint chocolate chip ice cream on Sarah's front porch. "Your Honor." Lisa's voice cut through the memory. Sarah realized she'd been silent too long, lost in the tapestry of their shared past that was rapidly rewinding in her mind. "Please continue, Ms. Washington," she managed, professional mask firmly in place. But as Lisa resumed her explanation, more pieces fell into place. The debate tournament in Cincinnati where they'd stayed up all night practicing, the summer they'd volunteered at the local legal aid office, Lisa's mother's famous sweet potato pie at every study session. The courtroom itself seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the weight of history building between the two women. Other attendees shifted in their seats, perhaps picking up on the unusual tension, the subtle current of recognition flowing between the bench and the podium. Sarah watched Lisa conclude her statement, every gesture and intonation adding another brush stroke to the portrait of memories taking shape in her mind. The professional distance she'd maintained for 15 years on the bench was crumbling, replaced by the undeniable truth that was about to break through the surface of her consciousness. This wasn't just any case. This wasn't just any Tuesday. And Lisa Washington wasn't just another defendant. The realization hit Judge Henderson like a thunderclap in a clear sky. Mid-sentence, as Lisa described her mentorship program's success rate, Sarah's mind finally bridged the gap between past and present. The scattered pieces of memory crystallized into perfect clarity. "Dictionary Lisa," she whispered, barely audible, her hands trembling slightly against the polished wood of her bench. Lisa paused in her testimony, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly. The nickname hung in the air between them, a key unlocking a treasure chest of shared memories. For a moment, the busy courtroom faded away, replaced by the echoes of two teenage girls in the school library. "Your Honor." Lisa's voice wavered slightly, professional composure briefly cracking as recognition dawned in her eyes too. The silver ring on her finger, the one Sarah had noticed earlier, glinted as she gripped the podium. They had bought matching rings at the mall the day they received their debate team championships. Sarah's mind raced through a kaleidoscope of memories. Lisa coaching her through AP English with endless vocabulary flashcards, earning her that affectionate nickname. Weekend study sessions fueled by Mrs. Washington's homemade cookies. The night before senior prom, Lisa patiently teaching her to dance in her family's living room, counting steps until Sarah finally got the rhythm right. The most vivid memory surfaced last, the day of Sarah's father's funeral. Lisa had stood beside her, holding her hand through the entire service, neither of them saying a word. The strength of that silent support had carried Sarah through the darkest day of her life. In the present, their eyes met across the courtroom. 2 decades of life experience lay between them, yet in that moment, they were both 18 again, full of dreams and promises to stay friends forever. The weight of lost time pressed against them both, years of missed phone calls, unattended reunions, and paths that had diverged without either of them choosing it. Sarah's legal pad blurred before her as she blinked back tears. Her hand instinctively moved to her neck, where she still wore the small silver pendant Lisa had given her for graduation. "For my future legal eagle," the card had read. "You're going to change the world." The courtroom remained silent, sensing the shift in atmosphere though unaware of its meaning. Marcus, her clerk, glanced up from his notes, noticing the unusual tension in Judge Henderson's normally composed demeanor. "Ms. Washington," Sarah managed, her judicial tone thin but present, "please continue." The words felt strange in her mouth, formal and insufficient for addressing someone who had once known her deepest fears and highest hopes. Lisa nodded, visibly collecting herself, as she resumed her testimony. Her voice carried an undertone that only Sarah would recognize. The same gentle encouragement she'd used when helping Sarah prepare for her LSATs after the loss of her father. Sarah watched her old friend speak, seeing both the accomplished woman before her and the bright-eyed girl who had been her closest confidant. The girl who had defended her against bullies, who had celebrated every victory and cushioned every defeat, who had believed in her dreams of becoming a judge long before they seemed possible. The irony of their reunion, here in her courtroom under these circumstances, struck Sarah with its bittersweet poetry. They had both achieved their dreams. She on the bench, Lisa a successful business leader. Yet somehow, in the pursuit of those very dreams they'd shared and supported, they had lost each other along the way. The atmosphere in the courtroom had transformed into something electric, charged with unspoken emotions. Sarah found herself studying the case file with unnecessary intensity, using it as an anchor while her mind struggled to reconcile Judge Henderson with the Sarah that Lisa had known. The girl who had dreamed of this very role while sprawled on her bedroom floor, surrounded by college applications. Each glance between them carried 2 decades of unspoken words. Lisa stood at the podium, her professional demeanor intact, but her fingers traced small circles on the wooden surface, a nervous habit Sarah remembered from their debate team days, one that only appeared before the most important competitions. "The circumstances you've described, Ms. Washington," Sarah began, her voice carrying the weight of her office even as her heart raced, "demonstrate a clear understanding of your responsibilities." She paused, fighting the urge to say more, to acknowledge the surreal nature of their reunion. Lisa nodded, maintaining the careful dance of formality. "Yes, Your Honor. I've always believed in taking responsibility for my actions." The slight emphasis on always rang with shared meaning, a reminder of their teenage pact to face life's challenges head-on, no excuses. The gallery of observers shifted restlessly, perhaps sensing the undercurrent of emotion beneath the professional exchange. Sarah noticed a young intern in the back row leaning forward, captivated by the inexplicable tension between judge and defendant. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the citation. The same hands that had once helped Lisa put up posters for student council, that had held the camera at Lisa's 18th birthday party, that had waved goodbye as they parted for different colleges. Choices that had inadvertently set them on diverging paths. "Your community service record is exemplary," Sarah continued, her judicial tone wavering almost imperceptibly. She knew Lisa would hear it. She had always been able to read Sarah's emotions, even when no one else could. "Particularly your work with young students." A ghost of a smile touched Lisa's lips. "Education has always been my passion, Your Honor." The words carried echoes of late-night conversations about changing the world through mentorship, dreams shared over cold pizza and warm sodas. The weight of their shared history pressed against the formal constraints of the courtroom. Sarah found herself fighting the muscle memory of easy laughter and casual conversation, the natural rhythm of their friendship temporarily preserved in amber, now struggling to break free. Marcus approached the bench with a document requiring her signature. As she reached for the pen, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in her computer screen. Judge Henderson in her robes, the very image of judicial authority. Yet superimposed over that reflection, she could almost see the teenage Sarah, her future self just a distant dream. Lisa's encouraging voice telling her she could do anything she set her mind to. The document signed, Sarah looked up to find Lisa watching her, with an expression that mirrored her own internal struggle, the delicate balance between honoring their present roles and acknowledging their shared past. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how these two women would navigate this unexpected intersection of personal history and professional duty. Time stretched like warm honey, each second heavy with meaning. Every procedural question, every formal response felt like speaking in code, layers of meaning running beneath the surface of standard legal discourse. They were no longer simply judge and defended, yet they couldn't be simply Sarah and Lisa either. At least not here, not now. Judge Henderson straightened in her chair, acutely aware of her responsibility to maintain the court's integrity, while her heart thundered in her chest. The next few moments would require every ounce of professional training she'd acquired over 15 years on the bench. "Ms. Washington," she began, her voice carrying the perfect blend of authority and composure, "this court acknowledges your outstanding contributions to the community." Her fingers traced the edge of the case file, a subtle gesture that Lisa would remember from their study sessions, Sarah's way of gathering her thoughts before making an important point. Lisa stood tall, her posture reflecting the poise they'd both learned in debate club. "Thank you, Your Honor. I strive to lead by example." The slight tilt of her head conveyed a world of understanding. They had both learned early that success required not just achievement, but grace under pressure. The sunlight streaming through the high windows shifted, creating a gentle glow around them both. Sarah noticed how Lisa's business suit, impeccably tailored, represented everything they'd once dreamed of becoming: successful, respected professionals making their mark on the world. "The court must consider both the letter and the spirit of the law," Sarah continued, each word measured and clear. She was no longer just speaking as a judge, but demonstrating the principles they'd once passionately debated in mock trials. "Your record shows a pattern of responsible citizenship and positive community impact." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as observers sensed something extraordinary in the exchange between these two accomplished women. It wasn't just the words being spoken, but the dignified way they navigated this unexpected reunion. Lisa's hands clasped at the podium, steady and sure. "I understand the importance of accountability, Your Honor." Her voice carried the same determination Sarah remembered from the night before their championship debate, when Lisa had helped her perfect her closing argument until dawn. The clock ticked steadily on the courtroom wall, marking time as Sarah prepared to deliver her ruling. In this moment, she was acutely aware of fulfilling the very role they had once imagined for her, sitting cross-legged on Lisa's bedroom floor, surrounded by college brochures and dreams. "This court finds that while the infraction requires acknowledgement," Sarah pronounced, her judicial authority unwavering, "your exemplary record and community service warrant consideration." She paused, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. "The fine will be minimal, with the recommendation that you continue your valuable work with youth mentorship programs." Lisa's eyes shone with understanding. This wasn't just a ruling. It was a recognition of their shared values, of the principles they'd established in their youth and carried into their adult lives. "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the court's wisdom." The formality of their exchange belied the deep current of mutual respect and shared history flowing beneath. Every gesture, every carefully chosen word reflected not just their present roles, but the foundation of integrity they'd built together years ago. As the proceedings drew to a close, Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, though her heart swelled with pride for the woman Lisa had become. They had both stayed true to their younger selves' ideals, even if their paths had diverged. "Court is adjourned," Sarah announced, her gavel striking with precise authority. In that final moment of official interaction, both women embodied everything they had once promised to become: leaders who would make a difference, professionals who would uphold justice and fairness, individuals who would face life's unexpected moments with dignity and grace. As soon as the heavy wooden door of her chambers closed behind them, 20 years of formality crumbled. Sarah's hands trembled as she removed her judicial robe, hanging it carefully on its stand, a final gesture of transition from Judge Henderson back to simply Sarah. "Lisa," she whispered, turning to face her old friend. The name felt both foreign and familiar on her tongue, like a favorite song she hadn't sung in years. They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the changes time had carved into each other's faces, laugh lines around eyes that still sparkled with the same intelligence, silver strands woven through hair that had once been adorned with friendship bracelets they'd made together. "Dictionary Lisa," Lisa echoed softly, a tear rolling down her cheek. I can't believe you remembered that ridiculous nickname." Her laugh, warm and genuine, broke the remaining tension in the room. Sarah moved forward, and suddenly they were embracing, years of distance dissolving in the warmth of recognition. "How could I forget? You made me memorize 50 sight words a week. My vocabulary cards still haunt my dreams." As they separated, both wiping tears, Sarah gestured to the comfortable chairs by the window. The same maple tree that had witnessed her morning contemplation now watched this reunion, its leaves dancing in the afternoon light. "You became a judge," Lisa said, pride evident in her voice, "just like you always said you would." Her hand reached out, touching Sarah's sleeve as if to confirm she was real. "I saw your name in the paper years ago, but I never thought we'd meet again like this," Sarah finished, remembering their easy way of completing each other's sentences. "I've followed your career too, you know. Your consulting firm's work with underprivileged students made the business section last month." Lisa's eyes widened. "You saw that?" "Of course I did. I've seen everything. The youth leadership program, the scholarship foundation." Sarah paused, emotion catching in her throat. "You're changing lives, Lisa, just like we promised we would." The afternoon sun painted warm patterns across the office carpet as they began filling in the gaps of 20 years. Stories flowed. Marriages, children, victories, and setbacks. Sarah learned about Lisa's twins, now in high school themselves. Lisa heard about Sarah's journey through law school while caring for her ailing father. "I should have been there," Lisa said softly, regret coloring her words. "When your father passed." Sarah shook her head. "You were there when it mattered most. That day at the funeral. I still remember how you held my hand through the entire service. Never said a word, just held on." Their conversation wandered through the years they'd missed, discovering how their lives had run parallel in unexpected ways. Both had mentored young women in their fields. Both had fought to break through glass ceilings. Both had carried the lessons of their friendship into their adult lives. "Remember our pact?" Lisa asked, reaching into her purse and pulling out a worn photograph. Two teenage girls in debate team blazers, arms around each other, promising to change the world. Sarah touched the image gently. "We did it, didn't we? Just not quite the way we planned." "Maybe that's what makes it even better," Lisa replied, wisdom replacing regret in her voice. "We found our own paths, but we never lost who we were. Who we promised to be." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows in Sarah's chambers as they reluctantly prepared to part ways. Their reunion had stretched longer than either had planned, but some moments deserved to steal time from ordinary schedules. "We can't let another 20 years slip by," Sarah said, reaching for a business card from her desk. She paused, then laughed softly. "Though I suppose we should exchange cell numbers instead. This feels a bit too formal." Lisa smiled, already typing in Sarah's contact information on her phone. "Do you still love that little Italian place on Maple Street, Angelo's?" Her eyes sparkled with the memory. "Where we used to split one dessert 4 ways because that's all we could afford. It's still there, and Angelo's son runs it now." Sarah's face lit up. "Saturday night? My treat this time. And we're getting our own desserts." "I'll bring the twins," Lisa said, her voice warm with anticipation. "They won't believe I know the judge who's in all their mock trial textbooks. My daughter, Jamie. She wants to be a lawyer too. She's exactly like we were at that age." Sarah moved to her desk, picking up an old photograph she kept tucked in her drawer. 2 young girls in graduation gowns, arms linked, faces bright with promise. "Look what I've kept all these years." Lisa touched the photograph gently. "We were so young, so sure we had everything figured out." She glanced up at Sarah. "Though I'd say we didn't do too badly, even if the path wasn't quite what we planned." "Different paths, same destination," Sarah mused. "Making a difference, each in our own way." They shared another hug, this one less desperate than the first, more grounded in their renewed connection. As they pulled apart, Lisa's eyes fell on the wall of certificates behind Sarah's desk. "Remember how we used to practice your acceptance speech for when you became a judge? Justice is not just about laws." Sarah quoted from memory. "It's about seeing the humanity in every person who enters the courtroom." She shook her head, smiling. "You wrote that line for me. And you lived up to it," Lisa replied softly. "I saw that today." As they walked toward the door, their steps synchronized naturally, falling into an old rhythm. Sarah's hand rested briefly on Lisa's shoulder. "Your number's already in my phone. If you don't hear from me by tomorrow evening, I'll call you," Lisa finished firmly. No more lost years. At the threshold, they paused, both aware of the significance of this moment. They weren't just reconnecting. They were building a bridge between who they had been and who they had become. "Saturday at 7, Sarah confirmed. "And Lisa, bring those old debate team photos if you still have them. My clerk Marcus doesn't believe I ever wore braces." Their laughter echoed down the courthouse hallway, a sound of friendship renewed, of time bridged, of promises kept in unexpected ways. As they finally parted, each woman carried with her not just memories of the past, but the warmth of a future rekindled. Walking back to her chambers, Sarah touched the silver pendant she still wore, Lisa's graduation gift. The words from its accompanying card echoed in her mind. "You're going to change the world." Looking back on this extraordinary day, she realized they both had in their own ways. And now, they would have the chance to share that journey once again.